The Rise and Fall of Lance Armstrong, How the Media Built Him Up, Then Dismantled His Reputation Piece by Piece, by Mo Lee. Love him or hate him, everyone knows who Lance Armstrong is. Cancer survivor, 7-time Tour de France winner, and the center of the greatest doping scandal in the history of cycling. What everyone fails to consider is how he got to where he is. How did he acquire so many adoring fans only to lose them all in a matter of months? That's the question I sought to answer. For the purpose of this project, I watched several documentaries about Lance Armstrong that were created both before and after his doping confession. I found that he fit into several narratives that fit the media's expectations. First, let's look at how the media built up Lance Armstrong as a Superman, and then we'll look at how they tore him down. Lance was raised in Texas by a single, hard-working mother. His father walked out on them when he was very young, and the two had to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, so to speak. His story is the traditional American narrative that teaches us that nothing will be handed to us freely, and the only way to get ahead is through hard work. He was the underdog that went on to achieve greatness because he never gave up. Lance spent his time training and working at a local bike shop, who supplied him with the gear he needed to compete in triathlons. At age 16, Lance was a professional sponsored athlete. At 21, he won the U.S. Pro Championship, and by the time he was 25, he'd won over 10 world titles and was named the youngest world road racing champion of all time. The media loved him. He was the poster child for hard work. Then, in 1996, Lance was diagnosed with testicular cancer. The day after his diagnosis, he underwent surgery to remove his right testicle, followed by a CAT scan. When Lance came to, he was informed that the cancer had spread to his lungs and brain. All professional contracts were terminated, and Lance underwent surgery to remove 2 lesions in his brain. In 3 months, he endured 4 rounds of chemotherapy in a fight for his life. Then, Lance did the unthinkable. Although he was given an estimated 3% chance of survival, Lance beat the odds and made a full recovery. 1 year later, he returned to professional cycling, and in 1999, he won his first Tour de France victory. This storyline of hard work, tragedy, and perseverance is exactly what the media sold to the public, and it's exactly what he published in his book, It's Not About the Bike. As Lance grew in fame, winning the Tour de France 4, 5, 6 consecutive years in a row, the doping allegations began piling up. The media, along with the public, had to pick a side. Was he guilty of the cheating allegations, or was Lance really Superman, overcoming every hardship he'd faced with hard work and the refusal to give up under any circumstance? For a while, most people agreed with the latter. One of Lance's biggest sponsors was Nike, and he used this as an advantage to ward off the doping allegations. In 2001, Nike released a commercial showing various clips of Lance being drug tested, followed by all the things he's done when he's training, testing his VO2, cycling against man-made wind, even sleeping. Lance explains that everyone wants to know what he's on. In a much harsher tone, he says, "I'm on my bike, busting my ass 6 hours a day. What are you on?" The second commercial, Driven, was released in 2009 when Lance came out of retirement. The ad features clips of Lance in training, contrasted with clips of cancer patients who were fighting just to sit up in bed or walk across the room. The audience sees Lance riding alone, followed by clips of surgeons huddled together in surgery. He acknowledges the critics' claims that he's arrogant and unable to let it go, but explains that they can say whatever they want. I'm not on my bike for them. All of these stories build up the narrative that hard work pays off, an ideal that Americans cling to very dearly. Thus, the story that is the media highlighted and those that Lance chose to share in his 2 books, It's Not About the Bike and Every Second Counts, are stories that portray Lance as an American hero, a boy who overcame unimaginable hardship, made his dreams a reality, and even gave back to society with his Livestrong Foundation, providing more money for cancer research than the U.S. government. Then came the confession. In 2012, Lance confessed to Oprah Winfrey that he had in fact used illegal performance-enhancing drugs during his 7 Tour de France victories. The interview, which was broken up into 2 segments that lasted about 50 minutes each, included Lance's entire confession and reasons for doing so. However, after the original interview was aired, the media chose very specific clips to recolor our perspectives of Lance Armstrong. Instead of highlighting clips from Oprah's interview that would portray Lance as human, the media chose to use clips that would make him look like a monster that was so consumed with winning that he didn't care about the fans he supposedly betrayed. They took quotes out of context, such as the fact that he would cheat again, leaving out the fact that this was a hypothetical situation regarding the possibility of going back to compete in the 90s and early 2000s. Furthermore, the media began to highlight reels of Lance reacting in heated moments, such as the way he'd respond to a critic after a race or his daughter after a defeat. While these clips were initially more or less hidden from the public because they wouldn't fit the heroic narrative that the media was trying to sell, they were suddenly surfacing on multiple media outlets as if this was new behavior. Lance's accomplishments, such as the fact he survived cancer and created the Livestrong Foundation, were forgotten. All attention was placed on Lance's mistakes. During his rise, Lance was praised for his do-whatever-it-takes mentality, whether it was in the way he looked at his cancer diagnosis or the way he looked at a bike race, such as the Tour de France. Long before Lance entered the cycling scene, the sport was riddled with doping, EPO, and other performance-enhancing drugs. However, because Lance was able to cheat the best, he was treated as though he created the problem himself. In several interviews with other big-name writers during Lance's reign, the general consensus was that everyone was doing it. It was simple. If someone wanted to compete, then they had to, like Lance, do whatever it takes. However, the media chose to glamorize these athletes for coming forward, when, in reality, they were offered bargain deals and minimalized penalties if they confessed and spoke out against Lance. Meanwhile, Lance was stripped of everything. Statistics have shown that the top finishers of the Tour de France have been far from clean since the early 1900s. It is a fact that during Lance's 7-year winning streak, 87% of the top 10 finishers alone were at the very least suspected of being dopers. Of that 87%, 48% have been confirmed, 39 of which were suspended during their careers. Such statistics confirm Lance's opinion during his interview with Oprah that he doesn't think it would have been possible to win a Tour de France race during that time unless someone was using some type of performance enhancer. So why is Lance being crucified? Because of the media. The media chose which stories to highlight, then told the public that Lance had betrayed us, along with anyone fighting cancer. For the next 2 years, his Facebook posts were spammed with hate mail from people threatening his life and accusing him of ruining the sport, ignorant to the fact that doping was a problem before Lance was even born. Because he was the best, people knew his name and trusted the media's out-of-context headlines. There is no question about whether or not what Lance did was right or wrong. Lance cheated, he lied under oath, and he attacked anyone who tried to expose him. However, the media used their power to create an image of Lance that made him look like a hero. The media chose to focus on his better traits while covering up his public outbursts of anger, his air of arrogance, or his shameless name-calling. It was only after he confessed that the media chose to highlight this side of Lance Armstrong. The lesson to take away from Lance, other than the fact that an athlete should not dope and then lie about it ruthlessly, is that the media is powerful. They have the ability to build up a man until even he believes himself to be invincible. When it turns out that Lance, like everyone else in the sport, was only human, the media was able to tell the whole truth that they had originally kept to themselves in an attempt to fit Lance into their American narrative. That he was, in fact, only human, cheating like the rest in the corrupt sport.